Investigative Committee wrapped up its second investigation involving Wichita Area Representative Ford Carr.
The committee chose to take no action, meaning they won't reprimand Carr or dismiss him. Keith Grant is in the newsroom with more on what the committee uncovered. Keith.
Mike and Rachel, Derby Area Representative Leah Howell filed this report against Representative Ford Carr. Howell claims Carr's action at the State House are not appropriate. Now, in Howell's report, she lays out 3 instances of Carr's actions where she claims Carr has had violent behavior. They were in 2023, 2024, and most recently the fight between Carr and Wichita Councilman Brandon Johnson back in January. Carr says there are cultural differences and other representatives are trying to tell him how to act.
Elected officials must uphold a standard of conduct that reflects the integrity of their office.
I do believe there's a standard of conduct. However, I do not believe that you as a white representative can dictate what my conduct should be as a black representative.
All right, now 2 members of that bipartisan investigative committee will write up a report on the investigation and present it to the entire legislature. Rachel?
Keith.